The beginning before the beginning. There's a quiet moment in life no one talks about. Not a crisis, not a breakdown, but something softer and much more dangerous. It happens when you wake up and realize you've been repeating the same day with a different name. You laugh, but it doesn't echo the same. You work, but it doesn't mean what it used to. You feel yourself drifting, not because you're lost, but because you've stayed too long in a place you've outgrown. There's nothing wrong. And that's the problem, because deep down, you've become too comfortable being someone you no longer are. Somewhere along the line, the version of you that was once necessary to survive, to fit in, to protect yourself, became the cage that now keeps you small. This video isn't about becoming someone new. It's about letting go of someone old. The version of you that keeps apologizing for being too intense. The version that compromises a little too much, a little too often. The one that smiles out of habit but hasn't felt alive in a while. No, you're not broken. You've just been loyal to a version of yourself that no longer fits. And here's the quiet truth most people never say out loud. Before you can become who you're meant to be, you must release who you've been pretending to be. But how do you do that? How do you shed a skin so familiar, even if it's suffocating? How do you let go when it's the only you you've ever known? That's the story we'll walk together today. Not through hype, not through another self-help checklist, but through a quieter path. A more ancient one. One walked by emperors in silence, one carved by those who didn't seek applause, but found their soul again. You don't need to fix yourself, you need to face yourself, and in that facing, with courage, clarity, and stillness, you will meet the version of you that's been waiting patiently behind the noise. So take a breath. You won't need to run, you only need to remember. The journey starts not with steps, but with a soft inward nod that whispers, "It's time." Chapter 1. The Forest of Familiar Chains. There is a place you return to often, not in miles, but in mind. It's the place where your habits live, where your doubts sleep, where your name echoes, but not always in your own voice. You know this forest well, though you've never walked it with your feet. You've walked it every morning. You've woken up and told yourself, maybe tomorrow I'll start. Every time you felt something rise inside you and silenced it. Every time you smiled when your soul wanted to shout. This is the forest of familiar chains. It's not dark because it's evil. It's dark because it's overgrown with what's been left unchecked. The paths are deep and easy to follow. Not because they're right, but because they're worn. You didn't mean to end up here. No one ever does. You just followed comfort until it became a cage. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. And so, your thoughts became habits. Your habits became patterns. And your patterns became a version of you that looks strong on the outside but feels tired when no one's watching. You're not weak, you're just entangled, like a traveler who wakes in the middle of the woods and doesn't remember how they got so far from home. But here's the truth that the Stoics whispered again and again. You don't need to know how you got here. You only need the courage to stop walking in circles. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." You may not have chosen every wound, every belief, every inherited way of thinking, but now, right now, you're being asked to choose whether to keep carrying them. That's the test of this forest. It doesn't scream at you, it whispers, "Stay." At least here, you know the way, but knowing the way doesn't mean it's the right way. And safety is not always sacred. Let me tell you a quiet truth. The most dangerous kind of pain isn't the kind that breaks you. It's the kind that numbs you. the kind that convinces you this is just who I am, as if you were carved in stone and not shaped by choice. But you were born to shape yourself again and again. There's a moment right here in this forest where you stop walking and you finally look around. You start seeing which beliefs are truly yours and which were given to you. You begin to question the voice that says you'll never change. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you feel something shift. Not a scream, not a breakthrough. Just space. The kind of space that lets a deeper voice begin to speak. The Stoics called this prohairesis, the rational faculty, the sovereign part of your mind that remains untouched by the world. It's your sacred fire, and it doesn't burn because others feed it. It burns because you choose to tend it. Seneca once wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." And in this moment, standing still in your own forest, you realize you do. You have power over your next thought. You have power over your next action. You have power over whether you keep pretending or start becoming. No one will see this moment. No one will applaud it. But this is where reinvention begins. Not when you find a new path, but when you admit the old ones no longer lead you where you're meant to go. So ask yourself quietly and honestly, what parts of me am I still loyal to, out of fear? What story have I told myself so many times that I've forgotten it was only ever a story? And if I could walk out of this forest, who would I choose to become instead? The Stoics would say, don't wait for permission. Don't ask the forest to make the choice for you. It never will, because this isn't a prison. It's just a place, and places can be left. You only need one thing to begin, the willingness to take a step that feels unfamiliar. A step that breaks the loop. A step that belongs to the you who's waiting on the other side of silence. And once you take it, once you decide not to keep reliving a life that no longer fits, then this forest becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a trap, but a threshold. Not the place you stayed forever, but the place you chose to leave. And that is where your story truly begins. Chapter 2. The Whispering Door. There's a moment on the path, not marked by a sign, but by a silence. You don't see it at first. It doesn't stand tall. It doesn't shine. It waits. Set into the moss-covered stone, almost hidden beneath vines and old memory, there is a door. Simple, weathered, the kind of door that's been closed for so long you forget it was ever meant to be opened. But something draws you to it, not noise, not urgency. Just a pull. The kind of pull that lives just beneath the skin when you're tired of pretending you don't hear your own soul whisper back. You step closer. You expect a handle, a lock, a riddle maybe, but there's none of that. Only stillness. Only the quiet sense that this door doesn't open by force. It opens when you're ready to stand still long enough to listen. That's why it's called the Whispering Door. Because it speaks, but only if you've silenced the noise inside your own head long enough to hear it. If you want to improve, Epictetus said, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. You think about that here, not because anyone else is watching, but because part of you still craves the old applause, the comfort of being right, the illusion of knowing. But in front of this door, knowing is the very thing that keeps it shut. Because you cannot walk through a new beginning while carrying the need to explain who you've been. You must be willing to be no one for a little while. To lay down the story, to lay down the armor, to lay down the answers, and hold the questions instead. And so you do. You sit in front of the door, not in defeat, but in reverence. Like a traveler returning to a place they never realized they left behind. The longer you stay, the more the noise begins to soften. The self-doubt, the comparison, the need to prove something to someone, all begin to fade like fog when the sun waits patiently behind it. And the door, without sound, without effort, begins to open, just slightly, just enough. What's behind it is not a destination, it's a clearing, a space where all the roles you've played dissolve, where the old names you carried, too much, too long, finally fall to the ground like worn-out coats. You enter, slowly, barefoot in your own becoming. Inside, it's not empty, it's sacred. Quiet as a cathedral built by your own longing, soft as a life waiting to be reclaimed. Here you hear your own voice again, not the loud one that performs, but the deeper one that remembers. The one that says, you were never meant to live in reaction. You were never meant to serve a script you didn't write. You were never meant to harden just to survive. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And this is that retreat. But you don't stay here forever. You don't need to. Because this place isn't for escape, it's for alignment. It's where you go to remember what actually matters and what never did. So you sit for a while, you breathe, and when you rise, you're not taller. But you are clearer, you are steadier, you are no longer reacting, you are responding. And that makes all the difference. The door doesn't close behind you, it remains open, not as an escape route, but as a reminder that any time the world feels too loud, any time you feel yourself slipping back into who you were, you can return, not to be fixed, but to be still. This is what Stoicism teaches you, not to escape your life, but to return to it differently, with a quieter strength, a rooted center, a presence that doesn't beg to be seen, but cannot be shaken. You don't need to force the next step you've already begun, because once you've heard the whisper behind the door, you can never unhear it. And that whisper is who you were always meant to become. Chapter 3, The Furnace of Old Names. There is a clearing past the whispering door. No signs. No instructions. Just a path made of ash soft beneath your feet, and at the center of it sits a small, low furnace. It doesn't roar, it doesn't smoke, it hums like something ancient and alive. Something that has burned quietly for a very long time. You step toward it, not out of curiosity, but because something inside you knows this place was always part of your journey, like a fire waiting for what you no longer need to carry. This is the furnace of old names, and it has one purpose: to help you release the weight of who you were told you are. The Stoics taught that our pain is not in the events, but in our judgments, and judgments have names, the ones you didn't choose, but came to wear anyway. Too much, too quiet, too emotional. Too ambitious, not enough, too slow. Too different. At some point, those words weren't just opinions, they became armor. Not because they protected you, but because they gave you something to explain why you held back. And when you say a name often enough, even if it hurts, it starts to feel like home. Marcus Aurelius said, "Reject your sense of injury and the injury itself disappears." But it's hard, isn't it? Hard to let go of the story when it's been your only mirror. Hard to release the old name when it's the only way the world has known you. Hard to stand there with nothing but your breath and your becoming. Still, the fire waits. It does not ask you to be ready, it only asks you to be honest. So you reach into your memory slowly. You take out the names, one by one. The ones whispered by parents who didn't know how to love without fear. The ones etched by teachers who couldn't see past your silence. The ones offered by friends who mistook your boundaries for distance. And the worst ones, the ones you gave yourself. You hold them in your hands, not with anger, but with reverence. They tried to keep you safe. They tried to explain the world. They tried to help you belong, but now you see, they were never meant to be carried forever. You lower them into the fire. The furnace does not flare. It accepts them. Softly, completely, and in that release, something happens. Not outside, but within. A kind of warmth that doesn't burn, but clears. You feel it behind your ribs, in the chest that's been braced for too long, in the breath that no longer hides. You are not what they called you. You never were. You were just someone trying to understand yourself through borrowed definitions. Seneca wrote, "Until we have begun to go without them, we fail to realize how unnecessary many things are." He was speaking of luxuries, but the wisdom holds for identity too. You don't need the labels to exist. You don't need their approval to be worthy. You don't need to be understood to be whole. In this furnace, what dies is not the past, but the illusion that you were only ever what the past made you. You are not what you've survived. You are what you choose to carry forward from it. So you stand a little taller now. Not because you're more, but because you're less burdened, less apologetic, less tied to a self that no longer serves you. You are not empty. You are cleared. And from that clearing, you begin to sense something else. Not louder, but truer. The voice you buried to keep the peace. The desire you denied to stay safe. The strength that stayed quiet so others wouldn't feel small. It's all still there, and now it has room to return. This is the work. Not to fight who you were, but to forgive them, to thank them, and then to let them go. Because who you're becoming cannot walk with shackles, not even the invisible ones. And so you walk on, lighter, unclaimed. Ready, the old names behind you, the true self just ahead. Chapter 4, The Tools of Self-Remaking. After the furnace, the path grows quiet again, not because the journey has ended, but because something in you has begun to settle, like warm soil that has just released its last frost. Ready now to receive, you walk slowly, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Because every step feels different now, lighter, more your own. And then, you see it, a small wooden cottage at the edge of the clearing, unremarkable. Unmarked, but the kind of place that doesn't call to your eyes, only to your soul. Inside it is bare. No furniture, no fire, just a table. And on it, 4 objects, simple and worn by use, each waiting for you like old friends who've known you longer than you've known yourself. These are the tools of self-remaking. You do not touch them yet, you observe, because in this space, nothing is taken without intention. The first is a blank journal, leather-bound, silent. It does not promise answers, but it does offer something rarer, a place to finally ask the real questions. Here, you will write not what others expect, but what you've hidden beneath achievement, image, and noise. Who are you when no one is watching? What truth have you postponed? What rhythm of life would you follow if you stopped marching to borrowed drums? Marcus Aurelius kept a journal too, not to impress others, but to speak to his own soul. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, and so will you. Not all at once, but word by word." As your thoughts return to your hands, the second tool is a bar of iron, plain. Cold, heavy, not a weapon. A reminder, discipline, the kind the world forgets in favor of speed, comfort, and shortcuts. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that freedom is forged through structure, that a mind untamed is a tyrant, but a mind trained is a sanctuary. You don't have to live on a battlefield to become a warrior. You just have to rise with intention, to say no when it would be easier to say yes, to choose what is right, quietly, when no one will ever know. Seneca said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." And you begin to see now, discipline is not a punishment, it's a devotion to the self you are becoming. The third is a bowl of water, clear, still, untouched. It does not speak, but it reflects. This is the practice of cleansing, not of the body, but of the mind. Each day you gather things, resentments, assumptions, emotional debris. And most days you carry them without question. But here, in this bowl, you remember, you are not your reactions, you are not your fear. You are not what others placed on your back. You are what remains after the letting go. Let your anger settle. Let your judgment dissolve. Let your expectations float to the surface, then pour them out and begin again. The final tool is a black mirror, not polished, not perfect. It does not flatter, it reveals. When you look into it, you don't see your face. You see your stance, how you've been meeting life, how often you've bowed when you should have stood, how long you've stared outward, hoping someone would validate your becoming. But this mirror, it waits for no audience. It reflects what's real, and what's real is always enough. Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This mirror doesn't ask, "Are you ready?" It asks, "Are you willing?" And slowly you nod. Not with words, but with the quiet, trembling agreement that comes when a soul says yes to its own unfolding. You do not take these tools with you. You carry their meaning instead, etched into your new posture, your new pace, your new way of meeting the world. The world will not notice right away, but it doesn't need to. Because the work of self-remaking was never meant to be a performance. It is a private ritual, done in silence, lived in integrity, proven not by applause, but by peace. And peace now walks with you. Chapter 5. The Trial of Slow Becoming. There is no trumpet that sounds when transformation begins, no dramatic lightning in the sky, only footsteps. Small, steady, often unnoticed, but yours. After leaving the cottage, the path becomes narrow, less clear. Not because you are lost, but because you are now walking a road no one can chart for you. This is the trial of slow becoming. Not the kind of trial that breaks you with force, but the kind that asks, will you show up even when no one sees? Will you keep walking even when no one claps? You wake up each day not as a new person, but as someone choosing again. And that's the work, the repetition of becoming. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You must build up your life action by action and be content if each one achieves its goal." You're not asked to leap, you're asked to return again and again. Return to your morning, to your silence, to your discipline, to your values. When the world tempts you to trade them for approval, the Stoics understood that greatness doesn't erupt. It accumulates, one decision at a time. Like the craftsman who shapes wood with steady hands, you carve your new life stroke by stroke. Some days the wood resists, some days your hands shake, but the form is still coming forward. Not because you force it, but because you refuse to abandon it. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Wasting time doesn't always look like laziness. Sometimes it looks like waiting for the perfect mood, the right motivation, the dramatic sign. But you're learning now. Revolution doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in quiet refusals. refusal to sleep through your own life, refusal to obey every impulse, refusal to treat discomfort as a stop sign. So you do the small things. You rise before the noise. You write what's real. You stretch your mind before you stretch your limbs. You speak less and say more. No one will hand you a medal for this. No one will name you king. But one day, quietly, you'll realize the war within you has changed. Not disappeared, but softened. Because you've trained yourself to meet chaos not with panic, but with posture. You've become someone who doesn't run from resistance, but reshapes themselves through it. That's the trial. That's the proof. Not that you never falter, but that you no longer retreat into the person you've outgrown. You'll still doubt, you'll still ache, but now you'll also continue. And that makes all the difference. You've stopped waiting for the dramatic shift. You've accepted the honest one. You understand that the Stoic way is not about detachment, it's about depth, about being so anchored in your principles that storms no longer unmake you. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." And so you do, not because it's glamorous, but because it's yours. Because you've tasted what it means to live on your own terms, not for applause, but for alignment. This is the slow becoming, the transformation no one sees until one day they do. They see how you walk into a room differently, how you speak with less noise, how your presence doesn't ask to be liked, it simply is. And even then, you won't explain it, because what you've built was never for them to understand. It was for you. Quietly, faithfully, like the sunrise. Becoming day by day what you once only imagined you could be. Chapter 6. The Wind That Does Not Praise. There comes a point in every journey where the sky opens wide. No more trees. No more maps, just space. You've walked long enough to leave the forest. The path is no longer cluttered by the past, but something feels unfamiliar, almost hollow, because now no one is clapping. There are no signs with your name, no voices cheering your progress, no eyes watching to say, "Well done." This is the wind that does not praise. And it's colder than you expected. You thought maybe the world would notice, would see your efforts, your quiet victories, would offer some gesture, some warmth. But this wind, it does not praise. It tests, it brushes past your face, not cruelly but indifferently, like time itself. And in its silence, it asks, were you walking for applause or for truth? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Here, with no audience, you are forced to see whether your reinvention is rooted in performance or in principle. You remember the old days, the subtle rewards of being who others needed you to be, the head nods, the compliments, the sense that if you just stayed within the lines, you'd be accepted. But acceptance built on approval is fragile. It turns the soul into a stage, and you were never born to perform, so you stand in the wind. Let it pass through you. Let it strip you of the need to be understood. You are not here to be explained. You are here to be embodied. The Stoics knew this tension well. They walked among emperors and beggars, praised by some, condemned by others, but unmoved. Because they had shifted their allegiance from perception to character. That's what this chapter is about. The sacred shift from being seen to being centered. Seneca said, "What progress have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself." Can you say the same? Can you walk in the world without a mirror, without the nods of approval, without the echo of validation, and still feel grounded? Can you honor your work, even when no one notices the hours you've carved into it? Can you protect your peace even when the world tempts you to be louder, faster, shinier? This is the real threshold. Not the first step, but the one you take after realizing there is no reward except the one inside you. And yes, it will ache at first. You will miss the noise, even the false belonging. But over time, a new silence will rise. Not the silence of being overlooked, but the silence of being whole. You'll begin to find joy in the stillness, in the mornings when no one texts, but you still rise early, in the conversations where you listen more than you speak, in the work you do for no one's applause but your own integrity. And this wind, the one that once felt so cold, it begins to feel clean, like something that's washing away the final traces of your need to be admired. It leaves behind only what's real, what's yours, what can't be taken. This is your initiation into sovereignty, not dominance over others, but authority over your own soul. You walk forward now, not because anyone is watching, but because you are. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And so the wind passes, not with fanfare, but with freedom. And you keep walking. Chapter 7. The Cloak of the Invisible King. Beyond the wind, the path turns golden, not because of light, but because of what has been left behind. You've shed the old names, you've stepped through silence, you've walked through the trial without applause. And now something unfamiliar rises within you, not pride, not excitement, but a quiet kind of knowing. There is a stone laid flat at the edge of the path, and resting upon it, folded, still and waiting, is a cloak. It doesn't shimmer, it doesn't announce itself, but when you see it, you know it was always meant for you. This is the cloak of the invisible king, woven not of thread, but of choices made when no one was watching, of discipline kept when no one applauded, of truth spoken when silence would have been safer. You lift it gently, it is weightless. And yet, when you wear it, you feel more grounded than ever before, because this cloak isn't meant to be seen, it's meant to be worn. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the cloak, not a crown, not a spotlight, but the embodiment of who you've quietly become. You are no longer ruled by reaction. You are no longer seduced by image. You are no longer shaped by the echo of other people's voices. You move now with a different rhythm. One that doesn't rush, one that doesn't beg to be acknowledged, one that belongs wholly to you. People may sense it, not always right away, but something in your presence will speak before you do. The steadiness in your eyes, the restraint in your tone, the way you pause before responding, not from fear, but from mastery. This is leadership in its purest form, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that influences by quiet example. You do not need to convince. You do not need to boast, you embody. You do not seek to control others, you govern yourself. Seneca wrote, "The greatest empire is to rule oneself, and you've earned that empire, not through conquest, but through surrender to what is true, what is steady, what is yours." So now you walk, not louder, but deeper. Each step carries a new kind of gravity, not the weight of trying, but the presence of becoming. You no longer need the old armor, the need to be liked, the need to explain, the need to prove. The cloak covers you without covering your essence. It lets you remain who you are, fully, quietly, powerfully. You become someone who doesn't seek control, but radiates calm. Someone who doesn't avoid storms, but walks through them without trembling. Not because life has gotten easier, but because you have. Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." You understand now, the greatest strength is invisible, and the one who wears it rarely feels the need to show it. You are that strength, not because of what you say, but because of how you lived. This is the final cloak of the Stoic, the quiet power, the disciplined grace, the humble certainty, and as you step forward, no longer looking back, no longer chasing forward, you realize you don't need the world to see you. You see yourself. And that has always been enough. Now the cloak moves with you, soft, unseen but unmistakably present. You are no longer becoming, you are being, and in that being, you are free, the quiet return. And so, you've walked the path. Not to become someone new, but to return to someone true. You passed through the forest, you stood before silence. You laid down old names, you built with steady hands, you stood in the wind. And you walked forward, not because anyone told you to, but because something inside you finally whispered, now. That whisper was always you. You didn't need a revolution. You needed a remembering. Because Stoicism isn't about perfection, it's not about feeling nothing, it's about choosing again and again to live by what matters, to respond instead of react, to hold your center even when the world pulls at your edges. You've already begun, and this journey doesn't end here. It continues each morning you rise with intention. Each moment you choose discipline over impulse, each time you say no to what weakens you, and yes to the quiet strength within you. So if this path spoke to something deep in you, stay close. Subscribe to the Stoic Philosophy and walk this road with us, not because you need more noise, but because in the right silence, you begin to hear your life more clearly. There are more chapters waiting. More practices, more truths. Each video is a companion for your quiet becoming. A reminder that you are not alone, and that becoming strong, calm, and free is not just possible, it's inevitable when you choose it daily. So come walk with us. Your life is already listening. Subscribe, watch the next video, and let your life become your loudest answer.